Today is Saturday. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and I am loopy about loop. So that's why I got up at this time to meet with people across the planet. We're going to run this quite openly to be able to ask and answer questions. So I'm glad that Teresa had emphasized this. So I do like to try and go through content, but also take little detours and help people understand a bit more about it. I also want to try and take you on something of a journey, so I don't want to spend too much on slides to start with. I want to go through and talk through a scenario or number of scenarios around how to use Microsoft Loop. And I'll flick back to slides occasionally to introduce some concepts and get that going. But I have just wanted to start off with a little bit of fun with this video I recorded with a friend of mine, trying to illustrate how we might be using something like Loop, where sometimes we do want to grab a piece of paper and make some notes or make a whiteboard out of something that's nearby to try and put our ideas together. And, you know, when we're in meetings, it's the same kind of challenge where maybe we need to find the right OneNote or start up a new document and share it with the right people. And there's all this friction as we start to try and collaborate and put our ideas together. And then someone says, well, why don't we just take the notes within the chat? And that's sometimes what we end up doing because it just takes so long to get to that point where we are able to collaborate. And this is where one of the needs that Microsoft Loop comes in and starts to answer. We're going to try and cover this workshop off in 4 sections, and I will be delivering it a bit differently in that I'll be running the most of it in demo to start with, but we'll cover off what is Microsoft Loop, what you can do today, when you would like to use Loop, and how to get started in your organization with Microsoft Loop. And I do welcome people to turn your cameras on if you're not shy. It's always good to be able to see people and their reactions. So if we can start a movement, feel free to turn them on. That'd be great. So let's get into it. Now, I want to just first of all start off by talking about what is or why Microsoft Loop. And the need that it's trying to fill before I start demonstrating and going through some of the scenarios. And I'm thinking about hybrid work, and this might be a reality for some of us now, or maybe some of us are just going to continue to work remotely and we're not really planning to go back into the office. But work needs to happen in all sorts of different places. And so I just thought we'd go through something like this. For me, I'm experiencing a very early morning meeting, an early online meeting, and it is from home. And as maybe we start to go back into the office and work from different places, maybe we're going to start our day there. We head into the office for in-person meetings. Some of our workplaces have downsized and now we're working from hot desks, or we just come in and we take our regular desk. But as I was talking with Chelsea, she joined me really early and helped me with all the sound checks. That one of the challenges with hybrid work is that we come in and we plan to be in the office with our team, but maybe our team members change their mind. We look around, there's only 4 people on the floor that houses about 500 people, and we sort of think to ourselves, why did I come into the office? Oh well, I'm still in an online meeting, but I'm here in person at the office. So that might be our experience. We come in. Now, sometimes we're coming in person to have those meetings, but then we have plans to have some focus time. So we might head back home and focus on our work, and that might be after lunch. But at the same time, others might be doing the opposite, and there's this changing of the guard as people come in. Oh, no, I'm heading home. Okay, oh, hello, welcome. So people come in and they swap around. And then that focus time might be spent working from home, but contributing to all sorts of projects globally in all sorts of different locations. So that's what hybrid work is going to look like, or does look like for some of us, that we are working with different people, different locations, and that need to be able to work from anywhere and everywhere. Sure, we're able to do that with current tools, but we still don't really feel connected, and sometimes that experience is quite jarring I've got work in a team. Okay, it's in Teams. Which channel, which team, which conversation,
I finally got it.
email.
The join button doesn't show up in iPad on the, well, at least in Edge and iPad. I didn't try Safari.
Fantastic. Let's see if we can mute our audience. Welcome, Justin. I can't find the button quick enough. So as we go through, let's see that from another point of view. This is just a little graph or way of sort of understanding how we might work. But those same ways that we've been working that I just explained, dealing with these fancy new words we see a bit more lately, asynchronous and synchronous work. And I'm like, oh my goodness, more jargon to learn and explain to people. So let's look at this. We started our day as an online meeting, and that was remote. But it was at the same time with people, much like you and I are working together now. We're in a presentation, a workshop. It's synchronous. It's at the same time, but it's remote. As we go into the office, that's considered in the same place at the same time. So still synchronous because we're there with people, hopefully, but we are also in the same place now. We have another mode of work which that's more about the changing of the guard and the switching around of things. Maybe we're working on a document or something, a deliverable, and one team starts on it, and then as that moves around the planet or it moves to a different time of day, that people continue to work on that. And I face that with a team that I work with based in Philadelphia, Chicago, and on some projects that includes any clients around the world. And lastly, it's that different place and different time way of working, which we tend to be between these two bottom ones more often now. We're synchronous at the same time in a meeting, but remote. And then we silo off into the task that we've got to complete, and that will be at any time. And that's where hybrid work is trying to offer those strengths as well of, I want to be able to work in the time that suits me and the time and place that suits me as well. So it's a good way to understand asynchronous and synchronous ways of working. I've been putting it out to the community. What are some ways that we find are easier to explain than synchronous and asynchronous? I could ask if you could maybe drop some of them in the chat, or feel like you have some suggestions to raise your hand and come off mute. One of the combos that I tried was, it's like working now or live or later. And so live being it's synchronous, later being asynchronous. Any other thoughts or suggestions there? I'll just pause for a bit. I do find because I work in change and adoption, and I'm working in the training space, I'm always looking for simpler ways to explain this as well, because if we're piling on another couple of words for people to understand, it's kind of difficult to get that message across. Right, well, this is normally where I would continue in slides and continue to talk about Microsoft Loop and its story, and then I would just sort of chop and change between demos. But because this is a 90-minute workshop and I do want to make it interactive and engaging, I'm going to try and start off by telling the story in demo. Now, I am using a reasonably large monitor, but I'm going to use a tool called Zoom It that allows me to go in and out and tell the story. I'm going to be also showing Loop across different experiences, like on the mobile, and I'm going to use browser today because I'm currently using Teams to attend this workshop. So we'll get started. We've got a few demo personas that we're going to use. Myself, we've got Laura down in the bottom right corner, and then we've got Matt off to the side, which I might bring Matt over and we'll introduce you to him a bit later. But Microsoft Loop, where do we start with this? Well, let's just explain a couple of things about Loop as we start to look at it. In this scenario, I'm going to try and use Loop to show how it is all about trying to work on ideas and work together without too much friction. This is one of the strengths of Microsoft Loop. And I know that some people on this call, let's just ask this question. Raise your hand if this is the first time that you've heard of Microsoft Loop and you thought, that sounds like an interesting session, I'll come along to that. Now, Chelsea, I'm looking for your hand because I know, yep. Stephanie, and yep. Okay, a number of people, yeah. Maybe I should have stayed on slides for a bit. Nah, let's keep it interactive. Let's ask you this then. If you're using Microsoft Teams, did you notice this little icon appear below your chat box? This is you could say it's like a little curly thing. I tried to draw it here on my whiteboard behind me, new icon. And were you in an organization which has the luxury of having people that promote these sorts of things or let you know that things are coming? Maybe, maybe not. Like a lot of us have seen things like this appear in our experience of Microsoft 365 and said, ooh, what's that? We'll click on it. So I'm in Teams. I'll go into a conversation here with Laura, and I'm in chat. And Laura and I, we frequently talk and chat about things. So, hey, Laura, let's just try and get this going. Okay, we'll send that off. So this is just, our usual chat. It might be even on a call that Laura and I get talking. And as we are talking, we might have an idea or some things to list and go through. So in my scenario, Laura and I, we're going to try and think about how, and this is going to be a bit inceptionist, but hey, there's this new product called Microsoft Loop, and we work in the change management team and letting people know about changes in our organization and technology. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do?
Hey, Darrell, we have a couple of raised hands.
Yeah, I was wondering about stopping and answering those questions. Yeah, okay, I was just going to ask, are the raised hands for questions or from the, this is the first time I've heard Loop before. I think we're all clear for hands, but thanks for pointing that out, Teresa. Okay. Yeah, and feel free, everyone, if you do raise your hand a bit later and you do have a question, we'll pause and take it. So, yeah, we're in a conversation, and the scenario is here that we're going to try and tell people about Microsoft Loop. And so Laura and I have noticed this icon pop up. We've had a bit of a play with it, and now we want to try and explain that to people. So I'll tell the story, and I'll also use the story to help us explore and explain Loop. So Laura and I, we've clicked on the Loop components icon. And I will step out and talk about some of these concepts with slides soon too. But let's start in demo. As we click on that, we're exploring it and thinking, what is this? What is Loop Components? Send a component that everyone in the chat can edit in line. Well, I'm just a regular person, and that sounds kind of confusing to me. Components, and I don't know what this is, but I'm going to try it out. Hey, Laura, we need to tell people about this, and let's try one of these options. So a component, and I'll just slip out of the persona scenario here, is a quick way to start collaborating with people in a conversation. And Microsoft have introduced this concept to us, first of all, in our Teams chat experience. So we've got a few choices of how we can start collaborating together. You remember that video I started at the beginning where we had Brittany and myself, and we're sitting there together. Oh, we've got some ideas. We need to write something down. Oh, you got a pen and paper? Have you got a whiteboard marker? Let's start, putting these things together. We can't do that easily as we're remote. So let's start off with a bulleted list. But we've got other options here too. We're going to explore throughout the workshop. Bulleted list is a good way to start a list of ideas, isn't it? Okay, so we've clicked that, and there's some interesting and strange things happening here as we explore Loop. We've added something to our chat. Interesting. It's actually popped up this space where I'm able to, looks like I can put some text in there and add a title. So we're going to go through some of these things. Laura and I think, okay, well, this is going to be, promoting use of Microsoft Loop. We've given it a title. And I'll just say here that Laura is in the chat, and here's Laura down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Let's join the chat here with Laura. So Laura's here, but Laura doesn't see anything yet. And that's one of the first points to note, that as someone starts a conversation and adds a loop to it, it's not shared yet. Okay, that's good. So that means that the person starting the loop needs to share it reasonably quickly. You know, I could get carried away here and start adding all sorts of thoughts and ideas and things to the bullet list. So, hey, Laura, why aren't you adding anything? Oh, Darrell, I don't see anything yet. Oh, what is this loop thing? Oh, okay, I get it. So we've given the loop a name. And it's also in draft. And there's our first clue here, that I haven't sent it. It's in draft. It's not shared with anyone. I can also see over here in the top right-hand corner that right now I'm the only one in the loop. I'm the only one that can see that. So this is good. These are all good clues as I'm starting to use loop. So, oh, Laura, look, I'm sorry. Look, let's get this going. What am I going to do? I'll send this, send the loop component. So some other things happen as I am sending that loop. We're going to have a look at some of these things later, but this loop is a file. It's like another Office document. It's a new type of Office document that's going to be used when we work this way. And in the background, what's happened is that title that I've given becomes the name of the file. Here it is up at the top. It's no longer in draft. It's now called a file called Promoting Use of Microsoft Loop. Great. What else? Well, I can now see that Laura is in there and that she has the file open. So I see a familiar kind of way of working. When we're co-authoring a document, sometimes we see those little faces pop up on the top right-hand corner. And this is good. It means that I'm not doing this alone, that Laura now has access to it and she can see it. So we are going to have a look a bit later at this loop and where it is and what that file is. But let's go down and have a quick look at Laura's experience. Here it is. It's in the chat. And she sees the other side of the equation. Here's Darrell. He's got the file open. Great. And now we can both access it. Laura also sees a few other things like I do. See who has access. So right now we can click on that and go, okay. It has been shared with people outside of this chat. Now, I will show you a bit later too, some permissions that we can choose as we create this loop, but I wanted to give you that first-hand experience of what is this loop thing? We wouldn't necessarily look at that. But when we share a loop in a chat, we have some permissions we can set to allow others to collaborate, and we'll see how that affects us later. And how we might share that loop by copying a link. But I want to keep it true to the experience. We might explore some of those things if we're curious and we're early adopters, but for now, we're trying to come up with some ideas. Oh, Michael, hey, welcome. I'll keep an eye on the chat there too as well. So I'll answer that question there. Are loops stored in OneDrive then? Yes, they are. I'll dive into that a bit later to show where those fit and how they work. But in a private chat where it's just Laura and I, that's a place that makes sense for us to have a file that's shared between us. Because one of the goals of Loop as we start to work together is it's about removing friction so that we can get in and start working. We're not looking for a shared OneNote. We're not looking for a channel that we might have in common or a team. Here we go. Here's a place that we can start working together and continue working together. Good question. I'll return to that. So we're listing some ideas, promoting the use of Microsoft Loop. So Laura and I, we've explored a bit of Loop, and now we're starting to understand a bit about it. So we start to list some ideas, and this bullet list, I'm going to add something to it, demonstrate simple scenarios. That's going to be important for promoting how to use Loop, because people like to see things in action rather than just hear an explanation. And often they like to get their hands on it. So I bet there might be some of you now that this might be the first time you've seen Loop, and perhaps you've got a chat open with a buddy from your workplace and you're trying things out, and suddenly this Loop pops up and they're now asking you, quick, what is this? What is this? Oh, I'm in this workshop with Darrell from Auckland. He's this crazy Kiwi from the future, and so I'm trying some of these loops out. So yeah, let's get into that. Demonstrate scenarios for Microsoft Loop. So Laura sees that. Great. Well, here's Laura's experience down here. Laura sees a familiar experience when we co-author in Office documents. Whoa, there's a live cursor. Okay. And there's also a circle around Darrell to show that he's active. It's the same color as the cursor. Great. That's also helpful. Can you imagine a few other people in here typing and adding content to this loop? Laura wants to add her idea as well, so she's going to do that. She thinks that it's actually quite good to create some quick reference guides. Wow, got to learn how to spell today. Good to know that spell checking is part of that experience within Loop. Now it is in the browser, but you'll actually get the same kind of prompts within Microsoft Teams. That's not to say that our ideas don't flow sometimes and we don't really care so much about spelling, because sometimes it's more about capturing the ideas. But you can see that Laura has added some ideas to it. I can see that Laura is working here too. We do get more colors as people start to pour in and add to some of these things, so you will see different colors and changes, but good. I can see some things that have been added there. I can see where Laura's typing, and we're not getting actually you don't get this now, do you? When you're in Word, you don't get any file locking or paragraph locking like we're used to with early co-authoring. So again, lowering the friction, we can continue to add ideas. What else have we got? We can also record a demonstration, or just demonstrate it in Lunch and Learn, do something like that. So we've got a few ideas here in a bulleted list, and already it's an advantage to us that Laura and I, we're starting to we're staying in that moment, we're coming up with ideas, we're exploring things. And this might be something that you could do, if this is new to you, with your team as you introduce them to Loop, that you could be starting to list ideas about how to use Loop within your team. And that's a bulleted list. Quite a useful, quick way to work together. But let's not just stop there. I want to keep telling the story by quickly adding someone else who I think would be quite high value, and we'll also have some other thoughts about adding content to this list. So the good thing about Loop is that you can loop people in. Honestly, side comment, I think this is one of the Microsoft products that is well named, that is going to become a verb and not confuse too many people, like being in the Teams team or which team and team site and all that. Yeah, got it. We understand that confusion, but Loop is going to be a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to loop another person in to be able to work on this. Now we're in a Teams chat. How would we normally do that? We would normally just add them to the chat. Well, that makes sense. Let's do that. So it's a conversation between Laura and I, and now I'm going to add Matt. Yeah, absolutely, Melanie, it is confusing. Boo, I miss Fluid, says Max. Oh, you must have a dev's heart in the background there, mate. Fluid actually was a good name. And I'll pause there to sort of talk about Loop and its history. It has been introduced to us over 2 years ago. I think it was at Build, maybe almost 3 years ago. So Max is probably one of the die-hard early adopters. And it was called Fluid because there's a framework behind it where you'll be able to develop and add this same kind of experience into your own applications. And we'll see it appear in other places too. But now that Loop is becoming more than just a framework, it's also going to become an application in its own right. I'm going to love the Loop puns as we get in there. Thanks, Mark. Power loop. Yeah, we need to go through the power loop. So we'll go back to our story. We'll add who was it? Matt. That's right. Right. We'll add Matt to our. No, not Matt Wade. Actually, I'll pause there again. Wouldn't it be great if we could add Matt Wade or someone externally to the loop? Today we can't share those loops externally. Now, that's another reason for us to have a loop that's shareable from OneDrive. Again, I'll dive into that later, but I can't share this with Matt Wade today. That will come. So let's stick with Matt Stafford. Okay. So I'm looping Matt in, and what happens here? Well, it actually finds a group chat that we all have in common. Matt, Laura, and I have formed a group that we called the Ideas Brigade, because we often do come up with ideas and discussions. Now, we might change the group name at some point for some other purpose, but we've added Matt to this conversation, and it's helpful to maybe have that as a separate conversation. Sometimes when we are adding new people to Teams chats, we get that option to add the chat history. And so we can loop people into the conversation, and they can read up on the background of how we arrived at this point to joining the chat. But it seems with loop that isn't the case. So you'll notice as I've looped Matt in, Matt doesn't have the loop in here. It's gone back to a group conversation, and so I need to take one more step to introduce Matt to this conversation. So I'll say, hey Matt. All right. I'm usually less formal. I like to hit backspace one time and not have the surname. That's just a Teams tip for you all. Let's say you can add some ideas to this. Okay. Conversation. So here we'll be chatting and adding some more context around this. But one of the other things that I'm going to need to do is add the loop to this group chat so that Matt can access it. So this gives me a good opportunity to tell you about sharing loops and how to bring a loop in a collaborative space into another conversation. And that's one of the strengths with Microsoft Loops. So I'll go back to the conversation I have with Laura, and we'll find that loop. So the loop experience that we see, think of it as a embedded collaboration document. And so as we go back to a conversation like this, we can see, okay, here's Laura, she's still in it. I now want to share that with Matt. So I'm going to copy the link to the loop. And I'll go over to the group chat that I have with Matt and Laura. And I'm going to paste that into the chat. And because it's within Microsoft Teams, where loop conversations and loop collaboration is supported, it embeds it. It takes that ugly looking great big SharePoint link with my this and that / massive GUID name / whatever. You know the one that we paste in and it just looks like, oh, why didn't I hyperlink that? Good thing that Teams does that sometimes now for us. But when the loop scenario, I paste that into the chat and boom, there it is. Here's the loop. However, it isn't yet in the chat again. Now it's a bit like when we create the loop, that if I haven't sent it yet, then it is not shared with the people in the conversation. I'll just comment there from Tony. I really wish that Microsoft would use the code name longer to avoid these renames like Viva Insights, Surface, exactly, or Apps for Enterprise. Yeah, the namings. Look, I think they have whole committees with that side of things. It's really interesting now they come up with some of these names. So we're back to our loop and our loop group, or our group for conversation about the loop. We haven't sent it yet. So I'll pause here and just show you something else that I could have showed you earlier. When we share a loop, we're copying that loop into the chat. It is exactly the same content that I've been working on with Laura earlier. But one thing I can show you is an option here to change permissions for the loop. Now this is interesting. If I go back, just drag this a bit over here, that might look familiar to you. If you've shared a document before in SharePoint or OneDrive, I'm sure you have, or if you've clicked on the share button within Office. I'm really glad that Microsoft made that a consistent experience across different applications. So I said Loop was a file. It's shared in OneDrive today. It'll be shared in SharePoint later with Teams and with channels. And so you'll get that familiar sharing dialog. We can set permissions for the loop as we share it. Now at the moment, I've got options here to share with people in my organization. So anyone who has the link and copies it into a chat, they'll be able to loop other people in. I don't have the option to share with anyone anonymously. So that's the one that we might use to loop in people externally if we were in a private meeting with people who are guests. I like this new option too that we see in some scenarios where we're sharing documents where we can share it with people currently in the chat, and that really nails it down to people that are currently in the chat. It means that when they go to copy the link to the loop, they can't share it with anyone else. So this is a good option if we want to just keep the collaboration tight and quiet. Maybe we're working on a Circuit Squirrel product idea that we don't want anyone else to know about yet. And the usual choices here too of specific people if we want to really do get specific, or people who currently have access. So that's all cool. Allowing editing. Now just for today and the demonstration, the option I'm going to stay with is people in my organization. So this is the most open way of being able to just loop people in and allow people to contribute. And we can change these permissions later if we do want to tighten things up. So we'll stick with that. And again, we're adding this to the group chat with Matt and sharing it. So as we send it off, you might have seen there briefly the hyperlinked words loop component, and then it turned into an embedded loop. Now we've got Laura and Matt, and they have the file open. They're not active in it yet, so there is I guess a concept that if you have the loop open but you're not clicking in and actually working on it, then you're not seen as being active. So let's click in here as, let's go over and do this from Matt's point of view. Maybe Laura for starters. So here's the loop. Laura sees myself and she sees Matt in the loop. She clicks in, and now we see back over here, Laura's active. I might just go back out and zoom out, try and make this a bit easier. Now Matt is also going to contribute. Okay, so we now see, oops. Now we see Matt's live cursor there. This is a very tricky product to demonstrate on your own, so it's always good if you are going to try and help people understand how to use Loop. You do have a demo buddy and you can show off some of the co-authoring capabilities. But I can see that Matt is alive and kicking here in the loop. He's about to add an idea as well, and here's the different color over him, so I can tell what his cursor is. So that's cool. And Matt can sort of add an idea. I'll just turn off my zoom in here and write a few other things. So what else could we do to promote the use of Microsoft Loop? We can introduce it during a Teams meeting, which we will do a bit later on. Okay, so we've got a loop that we've been building up. Now I know maybe this style of workshop and demonstration is running a bit slow. All we've done so far is we've added 4 ideas to our loop, and we've looped in Matt and added him to the group chat. But hopefully as we're going through and explaining this, that it's a little more engaging than just slideware. I will flick over to slides though soon to show a few concepts. And feel free again to raise your hand or ask questions as we go through this. But this is good. We've added Matt to the group. We can see he's added an idea, and now there might be a way for us to actually start to think about how to prioritize these ideas. to change the way that we're trying to collaborate here. So now I'm going to start introducing us to the thought that we could add other content than just a bulleted list to this loop component. We don't have to stop at what we started with. Remember, when we clicked on loop down here and created the loop, we had 6 different ways of starting with loop. We could create a bulleted list, a checklist, a numbered list. Well, those are all lists. What's the difference? Well, a checklist will have a little tick box. We'll see one of those later. Numbered list suggests that we are putting things in a certain order. Maybe they're steps or kind of a priority. A paragraph, well, that just lets us add text. And that's going to be useful for if you're just starting a loop and you wanted some input into co-authoring a paragraph or something like, hey, can you help me get the wording right? I'm going to put this paragraph in an email to send off to a client. A table is actually what we're going to create now in our current loop, which is, I would say, one of the more functional ways of organizing our ideas. For those of us who like lists and ways of putting our ideas together and collecting information, and I'm talking about lists from SharePoint, columns and other various pieces of metadata, the table is great. So we're going to use one of those soon too. And there'll be a task list that we'll add to loops a bit later with a little more functionality. But let's get some of these ideas in order. So I start to think, okay, let's actually consider prioritizing some of these things. So I want to add I could add some text there as a paragraph, but I'm going to use this /, and now I get more choices for different kinds of loops. These are loop components as well, and this is the space, if I can make a side comment again, that we're going to see a lot more action from Microsoft as they release other things that we can use to collaborate quickly and add these functional pieces to the way that we work. So we've got some choices here we are going to use throughout this workshop today. We've got our table, which we're going to use soon. We can mention people. We can add a date in there to sort of suggest that maybe a task needs to be created, or maybe we're taking notes today by adding things to it. We've got our task list. An agenda is going to be useful for when we're trying to pull together planning for a meeting and allowing people to add their things to the agenda as well. We can even add images to a loop and other things here. So this list is going to grow, this list of components, and they do have some planned for the near future. /, simple. Also, maybe you can right click on the loop as well, and you can start to see other options. Let's just scroll up a bit here, where we can copy paste. Of course, you can add a comment, you can add a hyperlink, and if you've started a loop or a list of sorts, you can also change what that is. You can change maybe from bulleted to checklists and all those sorts of things too. Quite useful. So / table. Oops. With that. Table. All right. So I began to type the words table. If I stuck with just TA, I've also got task list as an option. So this is a similar experience to other things where we begin to search and we get suggestions. We'll choose table, and it begins by giving us a very plain, regular looking table, rows and columns. As I hover over certain things, then other things appear too. So these are all going to be quite useful. Like I can change the order, I can add another column here and there. Let's get this started quickly. Ideas. Let's maybe put a description. And maybe we say who it is assigned to. So we're starting to build out a table. And today, I would like to be able to say that it's that I could select all that text and say, turn this into a table. Not yet. That's a feature request. We'll pop that on the pile. But today, I'm just going to cut and paste some of these things into the different cells. All right, so these are our ideas, and eventually we will have a new loop component called what was it called? Voting table. Yeah, so that would be another good one that is arriving in the next few months to start off an idea or a list of ideas, because then you'll be able to vote on them. All right, so we've got to the end of our table. I could tab my way through and create another row, but I'm just going to hover over this little dot, add another row, and there we go. We've got our list of ideas. Now, how does this help us? Well, it means that what I find with tables is that if we wanted to prioritize this, then I can drag these rows around. And that's really useful to be able to use to prioritize things or organize your information. And because we've got a table and we can add our columns, description, let's get into a bit more detail. What was the idea of this? What was the description of this idea? Create a quick reference guide. So we could create one-page guides to leave with people or download from our training portal. Cool. Add in a description. Let's also start thinking about assigning them to people. So this is where we use another loop component, or if you're so inclined, you're probably used to using the @ symbol. And it will give us a choice of the people that are in the chat, or rather the people that have access to the loop. And so I'm going to assign this to Laura. And that's cool. I'm also going to then we'll just assign this one to Matt. All right, so we'll try and change this up a bit. And yeah, I think we'll just keep with that. I think there's one other column that we might add here too, which is going to help, which is due date. Sounds good. Probably should assign something to myself as well. Okay, because it's me, it formats it a bit differently. So if someone else had mentioned me in this loop or in this table or anywhere else, then it's addressing me. It needs to stand out. So that's why I see it as red, but all the others are just hyperlinked for their names. We'll have a look at what that means shortly, but I just want to do one other thing, which is start adding some due dates. So /DA, or I could click on the choice there in the list, date, and we get a quick date picker. And that's pretty useful. So realistically, creating quick reference guides for something that we're only just starting to explore and understand, let's give them a realistic date. I'll say, like, is there anyone who can put a date there in the chat? Should we give them 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Do you think that they'll be able to just document as they go and then just put out a quick reference guide? Any suggestions? Oh, okay, we'll give them 4 weeks to be fair. So we'll move our way down to the, let's say, May 27th. Cool. Now check this out. The date, great. We see the date there, but we also have this relative thing within the brackets. 27 days left. I love that because there are some other places where I use this date loop component when I'm having a one-on-one with my team members, and I will always do /date, and I've got somewhere where it's recorded the date, and it'll say relatively today. In fact, if I did this down here, date, and I just choose today, so it's relative, it's today. That's not very fair to assign that to Matt and only give him till today to get it done, but we'll just leave it there for now. Very useful way of putting in the date and also having some relative reference point, especially when you're looking at tasks and seeing how long have I got to actually complete this task. Right, we've mentioned Laura and Matt in this loop, and And we do want to see what that looks like. Yeah, we'll go to that, and then we'll come back to show something else. Down here, we're having a look at our loop. Now, I'd cut and paste a whole lot of items out of our bulleted list, so maybe we can just get rid of that. Got our table. And down here, this is Laura. Great. Okay, so Laura's been mentioned. That's her perspective of being mentioned in a loop. Calls out to her that this particular item is hers, or maybe I was mentioning her in a paragraph, so I can clearly see where that is. That's quite helpful. But something else happens. When she gets mentioned, and I'll just jump into any old chat here, she could have been working somewhere else, some other time. Remember asynchronously and synchronously? She could have been working on some other project. And Laura goes to her activity feed because she's catching up with conversations and she's trying to see what's going on. And there's a new kind of mention. She's been mentioned in a loop. And because it's part of chat, it's all part of that activity feed. So she clicks on that, gets taken to where that loop is. And then you wouldn't have seen this very well over a Teams shared screen, but it does briefly highlight the chat as well within the feed. So there's all sorts of clues there as to, okay, this is important. I've been mentioned in the loop. I can see from my activity feed, it's something that I need to quickly review and catch up with. So all sorts of good signals to show that someone is collaborating with you or trying to catch up with you. There's one other thing that I'll show in our loop back over here as myself, that maybe we want to start on one of these ideas. So this gives me an opportunity to show a few things around just regular old text formatting. I've been using OneNote for a number of years, so I'm kind of used to working and collaborating in an open canvas and trying to get things going. But one of the things I do like to use is headings and styles and formatting. So one of these ideas that we're going to maybe start working on down here, let's maybe, demonstrate some simple scenarios. So demo scenarios, and we'll highlight that text and we'll make it a heading. Right, so on this page, it's going to have a bit more structure. It's going to be easier to cast my eye down. I can see here's a table about all the things and the ideas that we've come up with and who's been assigned to it. But why not start working and co-authoring the various things that we might need to do for this idea in the same space? So I'll pause here and say that this is another direction and thing about Loop that's going to build around this way of working. That the idea is that it's not just a place to scratch your ideas and start there and just pull things together, but as a culture and as a team, you might actually start doing more of your work within a loop as it becomes more capable, and then taking it out to a more fully functioning, more suitable tool like Word or PowerPoint or Planner or To-Do, eventually with that content. So we're going to do this. We're going to start co-authoring the idea and putting things together as part of that. So I'll just quickly throw a few words together here. Loop is best understood by demonstrating using simple scenarios, like creating a bullet list to start listing ideas, demonstrate it in the flow of work. Not bad. One comment, one mistake. Any typists out there might have been able to tell me how many words per minute I was typing. But we're starting to collaborate in a paragraph, and this conversation or this chat is becoming more than just a list of ideas, more than prioritizing and assigning tasks. It's now also becoming the place that we might start working together on this. So Matt, Laura and I, we're starting to really surround on this idea and start to bring it into reality. And one of the ways of doing that too is assigning maybe subtasks. We now have to do some things to try and demonstrate scenarios. Now, rather than me adding other things to this table of ideas, I'm now going to show you the task list, which we can start listing off some things about how we're going to bring this idea into reality for demonstrating scenarios. Now, I'd used / and chosen the tasks component this time. And this is pretty cool. It means that it's actually set up a table for us again. Great. But it's another type of component where not only is it laying out a quick way of listing tasks, but we also have a way to drag things into a different order. So similar kind of table. And we've got a checkbox. I haven't completed any tasks yet, but we know how checkboxes work or tick boxes work. So we'll show you that shortly. Let's just quickly add in a couple of tasks. Document 5 scenarios using loop. And we'll assign that tab away to Matt. And let's select a date. Let's just page our way down here and choose anything. And tab over to, well, not tab, that goes to the next chat. One more idea, one more task. Write demo script for scenarios. And Laura. And we'll just give another random date there. So task list, kind of useful, but some people in the community are already creating more presentations around, oh my goodness, we've got yet another place to record and use tasks. I was trying so hard to get everyone to use To-Do. I was trying so hard to get everyone to use Planner, or our team uses checklists and OneNote. Don't freak out, people. Don't worry. This is just a place to quickly list the tasks while we're in the flow of work. You're quite welcome to start using the other fuller, richer tools after this conversation. But good news, and this is public knowledge, I'm not getting in trouble saying this, it's not NDA, but there is going to be a way for this task list to synchronize with Planner and To-Do. Hooray! Under certain circumstances. So we're going to see more of this kind of integration with Loop, able to pipe our information through from our idea space into fuller, richer tools. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Cool. And you've seen Laura, and you've seen how she's been receiving those notifications. So I am going to switch back quickly now to go through a few concepts and tie some of this together before returning back to doing some more demonstration. And oh my goodness, we've already been going for an hour. So look, I was worried about whether we'd actually have 90 minutes worth of content and questions and interaction. What was I worried about? So let's tie some of this together. What is Microsoft Loop? Or what have we seen so far? We have seen that is a place to simply start. And I know that Loop looks a little different in this video. What are we also used to with products when they are launched and announced? They like to paint the picture of the future. So this is a render of what Loop might look like later on. That it is a way of adding content and information into our conversations, but what we're also seeing there demonstrated is also a way to bring information in from other systems. So this is it's a video on Loop, about Loop. So it has just looped back to the beginning. We see the picture of the future there too, of cursors and people emoting and slapping their hands together and going, woohoo, this is amazing. Of course we don't see that today. Not yet, no. They've released it to us in chat, and we're starting to see just the basic value of being able to collaborate together. But that's a picture of what Loop might look like. And there are some familiar things that we've already seen. We can see there are a number of people up on the top right-hand corner that are working there together. We saw cursors floating around. We can drag ideas around, and oh wow, there's it looks like it's an embedded whiteboard there too. So the future may look like this. I know I've said that a few times. Some things change as the product comes out, but hopefully you're getting the idea that it is a place to simply start. So if you are trying to find a good way to describe what is Microsoft Loop, it's a place to simply start. Let me show you. Right, so that's one of your adoption tips here as you're trying to get people on board and help them understand. Let me show you. It's a place to simply start, to co-create, to collaborate, to coordinate your content. So that's why we've got our task list. And one that I added over time as this as the story unfolds and the presentation continues is continue, because what we will see as Loop becomes more like what we see in this video, it could be a place where you're going to get most of your work done, and then the final step will be, let's bring that content into a fuller tool. Or to keep things simple, maybe we're going to keep all of the content and task-related coordination and other things all on that one canvas, so it's nice and easy for people to engage in these other different modes of work. We've seen a number of things about Loop, and Loop has different pieces to it. You've seen from that video that it is going to be a lot more than what we've seen so far. We've seen components, but there are going to be pages. In fact, there are pages now, which I'll show you in the background, and the concept of how we bring these pages together into workspaces. So I'm going to just take you through some concepts here and help you understand it. Components of what we've seen in action. So that's our way of being able to add a collaborative space to our conversations. And very, very useful, as you've seen. We've been able to start with some ideas, get some of those ideas in order. We've been able to loop Matt in, and we've been able to actually start working on our ideas as well by starting to plan out the way of demonstrating scenarios. And you've seen some examples here of the building blocks of Loop, that they are components, and you can add more components to the loop that you started with. So we saw in our examples, we're pulling everything together on a page. Here's another example of content planning. There's a bulleted list, and there's an agenda for maybe we're going to have a meeting around that. We've seen the table in action, and also the task list. And we've also seen that we can share loops in multiple places, that we can take that link to the loop and drop it into another chat, and that it is fast synchronizing and co-authoring. One of the things I've found as one of my favorite tools has gone over time is OneNote not really synchronizing in the speed that I'd like these days. Sometimes I'm tapping my fingers waiting for those changes to appear as Daniel and I are planning our notes for the next 365 Message Center show. So when we can share loops between people from different organizations, we're going to love that. When we do share loops, we're going to have another option very soon to be able to share it in Outlook. Right, loops are going to be coming as an option to add to an email message and to a meeting invite. So I had hoped that sort of thing would appear in time to be able to show you, but I have to paint the picture another way. One thing we're going to have a look at soon too is that when we started our loop, that it is creating a page, and this goes back to Michael's question about where loops are stored, and that how can we access them. Here I am, I've opened up the loop in another space, which we'll have a look at soon too. It's in office.com, and it gives me a bit more room around how to use the loop and work with content on that canvas and that page. I think this is going to be one place that might change too as we start to see the full loop application come out later on. And that is the loop application. There's some of the things that people who have been following the story of Loop as it unfolds. When is it going to arrive? We've been so used to Microsoft releasing software, even in sort of an MVP first release, where it has its own window, it has its own thing. It is an application you download or a website that you visit. But isn't it interesting that this way that they've released Loop has been within the places we're currently working? And that's the way that they're trying to coach us towards this way of working with Loop, that it is supposed to reach you where you are working and try and lower those barriers. But they are going to come up with a way to organize our loop pages and components and workspaces together in the loop app. So what does that look like? Again, a render, okay? I don't know if it'll exactly look like this. In fact, even if I look at this render, I see some anomalies, might you say. Yeah. We've got our loop component. So that's our purple flashing thing over there in the middle. That's our table. What else have we got? We've got pages. Here we go. So that's our page. It looks like in the future we'll be able to add things like unicorns to our titles and a header image. And those are all sorts of things that help to make a page a bit more engaging to look at and work with. Imagine that you're setting up a workspace to pull together ideas. These little things do help to be able to make it more engaging. And lastly, our workspaces, which is really the loop app. I think it's still going to look different to this, but the concept is reasonably familiar to us, that we have a tree structure and that our workspaces can be expanded and we can show different assets and loops that might be part of it. We can see people that are in those loops and in those workspaces. So today, as I've been creating different loops for demonstrations or at work, I've been using them, I've been getting this gradual list of all these new Office documents called loops piling up in my OneDrive. And my first question is, well, how do I find these and how do I work with them a bit later? And how do I organize them so people can work together with me? It all feels like it's kind of all over the place, even though it's all in the same folder in OneDrive. So the loop application is going to help us pull that together. I'd mentioned that loop is coming to Outlook soon, and this is an example of, it actually looks like the Outlook application is becoming more and more like Outlook on the web. And I think that's a good direction, in that as things have been updated, they're going to be able to keep up to date with changes and be a bit more agile, but it allows them to deliver things like the loop experience into the application as well. So this is an example of a loop within an email, and it's the same loop that's also perhaps begun as a group chat or a chat between people in Teams. Same content. It's all live and in real time, so people can be working from all of these different places. So that's as an example here. Yeah, that's right. So that was co-authoring and creating that as a table. And then here it is in action within that same email or another email. Okay. Now, I know that there were a few raised hands at the beginning saying, I haven't heard of Loop before, that's why I've come along, Darrell. It sounded like a lovely title to a presentation or workshop to come to, so that's why I'm attending. Then there are some of us who have actually heard some of the descriptions, the story around using Loop, and one of the things that they used to try and describe these Loop components was that they are atomic units of productivity. And, you know, how many people rolled their eyes or went, like, another fluffy term that we've got to try and come to terms with. How do we describe this to people? Amazing. So atomic units of productivity. I just saw a question come there that I might try and address. Oh, and we do have 20 minutes left. Are you able to export a loop like a table to Microsoft Word or Excel? Not yet. I'm pretty sure that that's going to be on the roadmap because they want to try and make content easy to shift around. Atomic units of productivity. Well, one way to think about this is to borrow from Matt Wade, but maybe it truly is a periodic table. What have we been typing as we / 2 letters, maybe 3 letters to make to pull together our loops on a page? So PA for paragraph, BU for bulleted lists, it comes up. At mention for people, cool. Atomic lists of productivity. What have I put together here? Well, we might write a paragraph about something to introduce the purpose of the loop. We might add an agenda as part of that too. And then some task lists. So this is maybe a follow-up list of things that we might need to do after the meeting has concluded. So you start to see what we have today are a bit like truly atomic units of productivity, that we're using 2 letters to put this loop in, this component into our loop. And like the original periodic table, there were spaces left for other things that as the elements were being discovered. So we know that there are other loops coming, and some of these are the status checker, the voting table, and a questions and answer list. But there's plenty of other space for that story to continue. So if you think of it as atomic units of productivity, we're adding some of these different components to a loop page to suit our purposes, and we can come up with all kinds of combinations to suit our productivity. Demo. We've been going through demo. Let's get back to demo because we've only got 18 minutes left. I do want to show you a few other things. So we've seen this loop in action. We've seen an idea created, and we've looped people into this. The group could have got bigger. Eventually the loop experience is not just going to be confined to Teams chat, but you'll also be able to do it within a team and be able to add a loop to a channel and work together on loops that way. But today, not yet. So one other thing that we can do is we can take this loop that we've created and expand that into, let's say, a synchronous experience, a live experience. Not just live co-authoring, but we could organize a meeting. So let's go through that experience. I'm going to just grab a link to the loop while I have it on screen, and we'll go through and quickly add a new meeting. Yes, it really is 3:30 right now, but we'll add a meeting. Okay, so on promoting loop. We'll add Matt and Laura. And we don't worry about times and stuff like that. One thing that we might eventually be able to add a loop is within that paragraph box here. But today, what I'm going to do is just a slight little workaround. I'm going to add it to the meeting chat after I send it off. So let's send that meeting to Matt and Laura. There we go, it's created. We'll open that up. Come on, Teams. Information traveling from data center to Auckland, New Zealand. Let's try this another way. Hover over that, click on it, chat with participants. Right. So one of the strengths of Microsoft Teams meetings is that we're supposed to be able to also have conversations before, during, and after a meeting. So here's our meeting that we've added or we've invited Matt and Laura to, and to be able to try and bring all our hard work that's happened in the loop. I'm going to paste that link into the chat for the meeting and send it off. And ta-da. Now I know I've only added Matt and Laura to this meeting invite, but maybe we're holding this meeting with a few more people in our team to introduce them to what we've done so far and to start to loop them in and give them some access to that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that experience improve. But this is a way to get a loop into the meeting. Now, because I'm already in a meeting with you now, I'm not going to try and step through running the meeting. But, well, maybe I will. Why not? Let's just do this from the web browser. Join that meeting. Don't worry about cameras. Let's jump over here and do the same. Laura's going to be one of those naughty people that doesn't receive or respond to the meeting and she's just going to join. Well, fair enough, Darrell. You've invited me to it at 3 in the morning, so that's what you're going to get. Just off screen, I'll do the same with Matt. So we have 3 people. This is really asking for trouble, isn't it? Mute. Good. Add one more person. I do want to show you this because, especially for those of you who are new to seeing Loop in action, it is useful in meetings, definitely. See here, we have a meeting with 3 people. Could be more. Good. I'm just making sure there's no mics on there, so there's no echoes. We're in the meeting. Let's have a look at the meeting chat. Let's open that up. Okay. So we have that loop component that's embedded there, or rather linked there. Not sure why, but usually this will actually show the loop embedded within the chat. It might be just the way that I've accessed it, or some change that's happening in the background. But what I want to paint the picture of for you there is, as you try it out and you add it to the chat for your meeting, you'll actually see the loop embedded here in the chat, and it's not the best experience because it's this thin little sliver to try and work with collaboration, and well, people will give up at that point because if there's a table that sort of expands out further, not much fun. So this gives me an opportunity to show you another way to use Loop, which is it'll actually show you where the Loop component is and where the Loop page lives. When we created that Loop page by adding a Loop component, and we added more content to that Loop, it has created a file for us, a Loop file. It has the .loop extension. If you look in the background, we'll have a look soon. But here's the same content, and this is quite useful for having the loop in a larger space to work with if we're wanting to tap away and contribute to the loop, but we're still meeting. I'm meeting here in a web browser, so I don't get the multi-window experience with Teams. But if you're using Teams on the desktop, you know that a window is open for our meeting right here that we're all contributing to or participating in. And we can have our main loop window main Teams window open there with the loop and the chat. So a couple of ways to have a larger experience of contributing to Loop outside of the meeting window. But my hope is that back here in that meeting window, feature request time, that that Loop becomes one of those meeting optimized applications. Like when we share a whiteboard or when we're sharing a presentation, our gallery of people appears at the top, the meeting chat is down the side, and I'd like to see the Loop there as a full, rich application right there where a presentation might normally be, so we can just collaborate on it and stay in the same window. Back to introduce you to a couple of other concepts in the last 10 minutes or so. Where is this loop sitting? Well, if we click into our name for our loop, we can see the location. That because I created it, it's sitting in my OneDrive, and I'll just click this link here to take us through to the folder. A loop created in a private chat will be stored within Microsoft Teams chat files in my OneDrive. And that's the right place to put it, because that's where the conversation started. Laura and we had a private chat. Doesn't need to be shared with everyone in a SharePoint site, doesn't need to be shared in a team. But eventually, as the idea grows, much like we might start a Word document in OneDrive, if that's the way that we work, we'll want to shift that into a team. We'll want to shift that into a site where people can contribute and that it becomes part of team collaboration, and maybe helps us with our file management as we think about when people leave and OneDrives need to be rescued or recovered or set to keep the content. Here's our loop file. It is .fluid still in my environment, but it will eventually be .loop and it is, as you can see, a file sitting in SharePoint and OneDrive, and it gets all of the usual goodness that we experience with a file. So I can see all the activity. I can see that it was added to a Teams meeting, so it's now a Teams chat. There are some conversations as I've been mentioned, and so I've got email notifications there. If I go through to, let's say, we'll go to details. All right, so all of those usual things, I can see who's got access at that point, and the links that have been used to share that with people. Thank you, Teresa. And one of the other things that, as Laura might have decided to work on this a bit later on, that she might want to go back and see things like version history, who's changed what. So one thing you can do at that Teams level is be able to see the changes that have been happening here in the loop. See everything here right from when we created it through to the latest version that Matt's added to. So all those good things, eventually I think that we'll be able to copy and take that loop and put it somewhere like a team, like a SharePoint site, and be able to work with that too. There's so much more I want to show you. That's okay. One other thing, we'll just end these meetings off here quickly and go back to our loops down there and there. Okay. So back into this loop, there's something else here too that people often ask about is, how do I know who changed what? Who's been working on what within this loop? So if I look down here for Laura's experience, and I click into a paragraph, I actually start to see attribution. Who typed what in this sentence? If I click on here, I can see 20 minutes ago Darrell changed that text there. If Laura changes this to brilliant scenarios, and then that synchronizes, or back over here, Darrell says, okay, well, who's been working on this paragraph? Darrell plus one other person. Who's that one other person? Laura. She just changed this now. She just changed the word brilliant in that sentence, whereas the rest of that was Darrell. So you'll see attribution like that. That's going to be quite useful for people to see and experience. One other thing, I know it's a very quick glance, but I wanted to show you what that mobile experience looks like. So here we have Ideas Brigade, that'll do. We're in the chat. We've got our loop, can't be shown right now. But if I tap into the loop, oh, come on, really? Let's try this from a different chat. Promoting the loop. Fantastic. Demo gods. Curse you. But you would normally see the content appearing there in that little embedded experience of loop. And I'd tap through here and I'd be able to actually edit the loop from my mobile and add content to there. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't spend too much time on that part of the demo. Trust me, it works. Normally it's just maybe it's having 3 AM itis over here in New Zealand. So that was quite a bit to take on. Was there anything else I wanted to show here in the slides? Planned and unplanned use of loop. Yeah, how to get others started. We've been talking through that actually as we've been showing the story, right? I think the most effective way to help people understand what loop is let me show you. Let's simply start and fire up that chat and start to add content to it. But certainly one scenario I think that loop will help is in meetings. So think about being able to add that content, rather to organize a meeting and add a loop to your meeting before you actually create the or start running the meeting. That's one of the more engaging ways. So target your meeting organizers to train them up and help them get started. Finishing off too, there are some resources. I figured that with the loop journey, rather than people like me writing blog posts and creating videos that sort of stand out there on their own, I've been pulling this all into a free course. So I'm using the Teachable platform. And if you go to the link down there, MWC tips, and I might just copy and paste it into the chat, you're able to go and find the Loop course. And we've also got a Microsoft Loop user group that's running. We've had 2 meetups. We're going to try and get another one scheduled for May as well, and try and keep learning together, because that's the best way to do it. I like to introduce myself at the end of a presentation. I don't like having my creds up there at the beginning and talking about my cat, my paintings, what I like to bake. Let's get into the presentation and do that, but that's me and my credentials and who I am and where I am. And thank you very much for everyone joining me in the questions and chat, and fantastic feedback. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Darrell, and thanks for spending your Saturday with us.
You're welcome. That's fantastic. And I really hope that you all have a great rest of the workshop day. I am going to go back to bed, not surprisingly. But yeah, fantastic, and enjoy the rest of the time.
Great. So I have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. So our random winner for our $25 gift card, I'm going to post their name in the chat here. If I can type. Is Michael. So we will be contacting you to go ahead and get that out to you. I thank you very much for your time, Darrell. I will be stopping the recording at this time, and we will be posting the recording out on our website. Usually takes like 4 or 5 days. Next, please make sure that you go out and complete our survey. We only can make our event better with your feedback. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Hope to see you somewhere in the ether, on the internet somewhere.